Hi, welcome back to the 9th week of Consider This, the virtual series where we simplify the science and public health of COVID. I'm McDowell.
And I'm Heidi Beidinger. Welcome. Our guests today are Marijo Martinec, who is the CEO of the Food Bank of Northern Indiana, and Jim Conklin, who is the president and co-founder of Cultivate Food Rescue. We're going to introduce them shortly, but first, as always, as a reminder, the purpose of our webinar. Marianne and I came together to put this webinar together to break down the science and the public health of COVID.
So we hope you're finding it informative and that you're passing on the information that you're learning to others. And I want to remind you that we post educational tutorials, and Heidi goes over the COVID data every week. And so you can get that on the website if you haven't checked them out already. And please email us if you have any questions or comments at consider@nd.edu. And as I do every week, I want to remind you that the views that are presented here are the views of Heidi and my own, as well as our guests, and not explicitly the views or the policies of the University of Notre Dame. And the information is not intended to, nor should it be interpreted as specific health or medical advice or substitute for the advice of your own practitioner.
Quite the disclaimer.
Yep.
So it's always a mouthful. So, last week we had a really fantastic conversation with the University of Notre Dame's Associate Vice President for Research, Liz Ruley, and Dr. Paul Hergenrother from the University of Illinois was here as well. And they were talking about the different testing platforms and strategies that are being implemented on those campuses. And it was a terrific conversation. And if you missed it, no worries, because it is posted on the ThinkND webpage. And if you still have questions about it, you just let us know and we will follow up on those as well. So here we are now in week 9 of our series. So let's go ahead and introduce our guests. So we'll cue the guests.
All right, there's one.
Hey.
Hi, Jim.
Hi.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Marijo.
Good evening. How are you?
Good, 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 good. We are so pleased that you guys are here. Today's our show's guests, and I have short bios that I want to read showcasing the both of you. So Jim Conklin, as I said, is the president and co-founder of Cultivate Food Rescue, which is a nonprofit organization here in our community. Their mission is to build a local network of food suppliers with the goal of providing wholesome meals so that no one in our community goes hungry. The two main programs of Cultivate Food Rescue are, in fact, Food Rescue and the Backpack Program. Food Rescue is the process of taking never served food that would have been thrown away and turning it into wholesome frozen meals. The Backpack Program provides 6 healthy meals to a child in need every Friday. Cultivate is currently providing 400 backpacks to hungry children in 3 different counties. Marijo Martinec is the executive director and CEO of the Food Bank of Northern Indiana, which was founded in 1993. And the Food Bank works in partnership with the community to feed the hungry, to increase awareness of the effects of hunger, and to lead programs designed to alleviate hunger. And the Food Bank actively partners with a wide range of local and national manufacturers, wholesalers, retailers, food growers, packers, and brokers to procure food. And you also serve Elkhart, LaPorte, Kosciuszko, Marshall, Stark, and St. Joseph County. And in 2019, the Food Bank distributed more than 8.8 million pounds of food to its network of 150 member agencies in its 6 county service area. My goodness, welcome to you both.
Thank you.
You guys, Jim and Marijo, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to hear about, well, maybe not excited to hear about food insecurity, but I'm interested in it, and I'm sure our guests are as well, and particularly how we can be helpful. But before we get started into that conversation, Heidi and I always like our guests to tell a little bit about themselves, so the audience gets to know you, like how you got where you are, why you do what you do. And we also like to hear a fun fact. So Marijo, would you like to start?
Sure, thank you. I started at the food bank. I've been here 10 years, and I actually came because I lost my job during the Great Recession. Spent a year substitute teaching, which I dearly loved, and I only planned to be at this job for 6 months. This was going to be a bridge to my next great adventure, but love the mission. And the work that we do. You know, everybody deserves to have food on the table. And so that has been a real blessing in my life and a great journey. Fun fact is that if Oprah Winfrey called me and said, Marijo, I want you to come and be my assistant, I would probably drop everything and go do that. So, you know, I sometimes quote her in staff meetings as Oprah says. So
Yeah, I can see
that's
your
fun or not, or you maybe think I have some issues.
yeah, I can see your staff. They're all rolling their eyes. There she goes with Oprah again.
Yes, right.
Well, thank you, Jim. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm probably don't have the typical resume as somebody that starts and runs a not-for-profit. I'm accounting degree from Butler University, a master's in accounting from IU. Spent 20 years in the for-profit world. Still spend my daytime in the for-profit world. Yeah, I'm a CPA by trade, a traditional accountant, but find myself in the limelight of food insecurity in our community. So I love data. I love eliminating waste. And so I'm just applying those principles to this current venture here we call Cultivate. So it's super exciting. It's a little bit of a fun fact is that, you know, I think when I went to school, I was going to be an attorney. Well, I wanted to be a teacher and figured out I wouldn't make enough money. And then I wanted to be an attorney and I ended up being an accountant. So I run a not-for-profit and all those things come into play. So it's life brings you back to where you thought you would end up, where you thought you would start.
Yeah, that's really a nice sentiment. Thank you, both of you, for sharing.
So the first segment of our show we like to call Rumor Has It. So Marianne and I, in conversations with friends and family during the week, we ask them, we'll say to them what the topic of our show is, and then have you heard any rumors or myths that are related to the topic? And so this week, this is what we heard. We've heard that about half of all the food in the US is being thrown away. Is this true? And are we doing anything about it? Jim, I thought that might be one for you.
Yeah, so it's 40% in the US. Globally, it's about a third of the food that's manufactured. It's not just a developed country issue. It's actually in developing countries as well, for entirely different reasons, for not having good transportation systems and things like that, and storage facilities with, you know, with freezers and those kind of things. But it's a global issue. It adds about 8% to our carbon emissions. So it's one of the least talked about to reduce our carbon footprint. And so I think our venture here with Notre Dame is centered around not just food insecurity, but how do we make a positive impact on the environment?
Wow, that's a tall order. Food insecurity and improving the environment. And I know we're going to jump more into all of those topics. Marijo, we also heard a rumor that perhaps you could answer. So we're hearing that pantries are closing due to a lack of volunteers. Is this true? Tell us what's happening.
Yeah, it is not true. The majority of our pantries have stayed open during the pandemic. They may have reduced their hours of operation or changed their model of distribution. Many food pantries have volunteers that are in that age range where they've been asked to stay at home or may have some health issues. But for the majority of them, they are so committed to the work that they do that they've continued to do it throughout the pandemic, just differently.
That's a relief to hear that. Yeah.
What about nationally? Do you know nationally, are food banks or food pantries closing, or?
Food banks are remaining open. The challenge is going to be, as the effects of the pandemic go on into 2021, having enough food to be able to serve the volume of people that need that food assistance. And one thing, hunger has been in our communities for years. It happens all across the United States. Every county has hungry people. What COVID-19 has done is kind of peeled that away. So now more people realize, because they see it, it's being talked about. Hunger is something that's very silent. If we go hungry, we don't want to tell people that we're hungry. So I think more people are aware of that, but hunger's always been there.
Yeah, expressing.
So, Marijo, that takes us right into our next segment, and that is we'd like to look at the data about the topic that we're talking about. And so, in reviewing some reports this week and getting myself educated even better on this topic, I had read that before the pandemic hit, about 10% of US households were experiencing insecurity, about 10%. And now, according to a study that was done by Northwestern University, that number has hit 23% of households, so doubling since COVID got started. And then they went on to say, more specifically, studying households with children. And then that number goes up to 27.5%. And in another study, they actually found it was a third of those homes. And so the numbers are, they're stunning and staggering. And I know there's a lot to unpack here in those numbers, but I'm just wondering to both of you, is that what does food insecurity look like in St. Joe County?
Food insecurity, so our definition of food insecurity is that people who don't have enough food and regular access to food to maintain a healthy lifestyle. So our numbers are 1 in 6 adults, 1 in 4 children in our community struggle with hunger.
That's a lot. That's a lot of kids.
I would add to that, almost in St. Joe County, almost half of our students are on free and reduced lunch. Nationwide, that number is 54%. So you think in one of the wealthiest countries in the nation, over half our kids are on free and reduced lunch. Indiana specifically, I did some research as well. Food insecurity could go as high as 40%, people think. So that's an awful scary number. And that the impact of the growth in food insecurity will lag any rebound in the economy or any rebound in the vaccine or improvement in COVID-19 cases. It's a huge lag in people, being able to repair their financial situation, their housing situation, and they'll just get further and further behind on things. So we expect, and Marijo says this quite a bit, that this is really a marathon, that we're in mile 4 maybe of that marathon when it comes to food insecurity.
I wanted to follow up a little bit on that statistic that you were talking about, the free and reduced lunches. Are the food pantries or food rescue seeing an increased need among children now that the schools are virtual or sometimes shut down? Is that putting that more need on you guys?
I think, and Jim will add to this. So I think our school systems have been doing heroic work over the past 9 months now that we're in this pandemic, really trying to provide resources, working with us, working with Cultivate to get food out at feeding sites for kids, because, let's be honest, I mean, that it's enticing them. We know with our backpack program that the kids who are on that backpack program, they come to school more regularly, and especially on Friday, because they know they're going to get that pack of food for the weekend. So, you know, our schools, we have a group that we work with, and Jim is one of the founders of this group. We meet weekly, and the school systems, I mean, they're making a lot of good things happen for kids who are in need right now, and doing heroic work to get that food out to them.
Yeah, I agree that I think South Bend schools a few weeks back had hit 900,000 meals that they have served since the pandemic. At one point, they were feeding 30,000 people with 17,000 students. So their reach went beyond just their students. It went to their families and extended families. Just last week, one of our employees got to do a ride along on a South Bend school bus to 150 homes where Marijo's food and our meals met up with school employees and was distributed all throughout St. Joe County. So there you have three very different organizations coming together to do their part to reduce food insecurity during a really difficult time.
Yeah, and that's happening really in communities, in all the communities that the food bank serves, and really in probably all communities across the country as well. People are really stepping up because, you know, food, I mean, it's a basic need, and so many people are struggling right now.
So the folks who are coming there, are they, sometimes they're probably first time that they're ever coming to a food pantry, and they didn't come in April, but they're even coming now, right? For the first time.
Right. So many people have entered the charitable food system for the first time because of this pandemic. You know, we've seen people that they may have come to a food pantry a few years ago. Now they have to come back. It's all ages. Hunger really doesn't discriminate.
Right.
It can happen to anyone. And so many people don't have that safety net. You know, they don't have, you know, they live paycheck to paycheck. And you know, if something happens, food is always going to be the first thing they give up to pay for other bills that they have and other expenses.
Yeah, across the board, I think we see pantries 3 to 4 times busier than they were last year at this time. I know Marijo has mentioned several times that they're serving a record number of families, and the long lines that come on days of distribution, literally stretching down the road, people lining up hours and hours ahead of time just to make sure they can get some food.
Yeah, the lines have been long, and I feel like being, you know, I've worked at the food bank 10 years, but last week we did some turkey distributions, and I went to a couple of those distributions, and it took my breath away for a moment that people were in line in that desperation, and they were so anxious, wanting to make sure that they were able to get that turkey, again, to have some normalcy in their life and have a holiday like, you know, we all wanted to do last week.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And actually that comment brings us to our next section. So some of the headlines that I chose address Thanksgiving and lines. So I actually chose 3 headlines for this section. We'll do the first 2 first, and then I'll do the third one. So the first 2, one was published in The Hill on November 24th. Long lines form at food banks across the country ahead of Thanksgiving. And the second was in the South Bend Tribune on November 13th. Cars line up for mobile pantry at food bank in South Bend. So you addressed the long lines. That was going to be one of my questions. But I was really interested in the car line. And is this something that changed the way you distribute food because of the pandemic? And maybe you could talk about other things that might have changed.
Yeah, so we immediately changed our model of distribution. We have an on-site pantry, which is a little atypical. Not all food banks have a pantry because a food bank is a warehouse of food. We bring food in and distribute it out. And we had to quickly change to a no contact, pre-boxed, pre-bagged method of distribution. We are all about having people have dignity. So again, when you go to our pantry, you select what you want. We had to take all of that away. The lines are, I think people may be surprised, maybe not. So last week, during Thanksgiving week, distribution started at 9 a.m. People lined up beginning at 6:30 in the morning. Our Thursday afternoon distributions that we do here, they start at 3 p.m. People line up at 8:30 or 9 a.m. So they're willing, they will sit in their cart, and we've had, this is Indiana, so we always have all kinds of weather. It's hot, it's snowing, it's raining, and they do that to get that box of food or those food items. So I had to chuckle. The reporter who called me about the story in the South Bend Tribune a few weeks ago, he said, "Hey, Marijo, did you know you had a line of people out there?" And I it's been like that since March 26th when we started doing these distributions.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty amazing. It's very sobering to hear these stories. So the next headline that I chose actually maybe is a good thing. And it was clear back in July, and it was in the South Bend Tribune, and it was entitled "Food Rescue Partnership Reaches 100,000 Pound Milestone." And I think it was talking about Cultivate in Notre Dame. And
Yeah.
so can you tell us a little bit about where we are now and about that relationship?
Yeah, actually, just today, I got an email that we hit 1 million pounds since our inception.
Wow.
Wow,
Yeah.
congratulations.
They're different. We're a little bit like a food bank and a soup kitchen put together. So what makes us different than a food bank is that we rescue already prepared food, and we put it into frozen meals with food that we make. And so we also distribute food when we come by it that isn't great for our frozen meals onto pantries in our community. So that makes us similar to a food bank, but we're highly focused on food that's already been prepared, hasn't been served. So we rescue from the dining hall on campus. And then the football program has been one of our largest contributors of food. Any average season, this is certainly not an average season, we rescue 25,000 pounds of food from 6 home football games. And then we actually work with the football team who is fed a diet as a part of their training program. And we rescue it there on a daily basis, 7 days a week, sometimes 3 times a day. And that comes out to about 20,000 pounds of food just from that program. So anywhere from 45 to 50,000. The South Dining Hall was new addition to this year. And it's been a little bit different with the pandemic, but we are one of the few organizations that are allowed on campus to rescue food. And Notre Dame has a huge commitment, not only to feeding people in our community, but also not to see food going to waste.
Yeah.
And so the best thing we can do with food that would potentially be wasted is serve another person that could really use it.
Absolutely. So where the conversation to go now is to sort of like give the history of both of your organizations. So you guys have already touched on some of like what the food bank is, what food rescue means, and Cultivate. Maybe Marijo, you could start with, how did food banks even come into existence? How do you get your funding? What kind of food do you serve? Kind of the nuts and bolts so we can imagine,
Sure.
with it. what it looks
Sure.
like.
So again, food bank is a warehouse of food, kind of like a bank, money in, money out, food in, food out. So we've been around for 27 years. We were founded by United Religious Community of St. Joseph County to address food insecurity, hunger in northern Indiana. We're part of Feeding America, which is the nation's largest hunger charity. It's comprised of 200 food banks across the United States. And as a Feeding America food bank, we have a lot of restrictions and rules that we must follow. And that's why Jim is a great partner of ours with Cultivate, because we're never going to get in the repackaging of food business as an organization. But we work with a network of about 150 partners in 6 counties. So they're food pantries, soup kitchens, shelters, daycare facilities, and we distribute food through those agencies. Through October, we have distributed 9.6 million pounds of food this year, which is about 7.5 million meals. And it's, I sometimes am manic. I'm up or down. It's awesome to have this number to distribute, but it's really sad this year. I mean, we will have a record number of pounds that we've distributed, and those numbers are just through October. We're food distributions. That's what we do.
Where does your food come from, Marijo?
We work with national retail partners through Feeding America. We work with growers, manufacturers. So a lot of food has a longer shelf life than what we all think. And we're able to extend that. So the only thing that we destroy the day it expires is baby food and baby formula, just because of, the infants consuming that. We want them to be healthy. So we work with a variety of partners and a lot of great national partners through our partnership and membership with Feeding America.
Is there any food that you don't take? Like if a retailer wanted to give you a bunch of Twinkies or something like that?
We've changed our philosophy with that over the years because I think sometimes people think, well, it's not healthy enough for me, but if you're hungry, you should want to eat anything. It's really hard for me because I know when I go to the grocery store, sometimes I like those treats that we get when we go grocery shopping, and which aren't always healthy for you, but gosh, they taste really good. So we try to have a little balance. We want to provide healthy foods because we know when you eat healthy, you're going to be a better community member. You're going to be better at everything. But sometimes having a little something not so good for you is good too, especially during this time of the pandemic where, we need to really take care of ourselves.
And funding. How are you paying for all of this?
We do get some funding through the federal government because we administer a couple of programs, the Emergency Food Assistance Program, TFAP, we administer, and CSFP, Commodity Supplemental Food Program. But we rely and are grateful for the generosity of people who donate and believe in the work that we do. Mm-hmm. So we fundraise and, we will continue to do that to feed the hungry. So, and the community's been very generous with all of our organizations this year in helping us, but we'll continue to need that help for the foreseeable future.
So Jim, for Cultivate, so in a similar vein, what was the seed? How did Cultivate happen? Do they exist in other counties? How do you guys fund yourselves?
Right. You know, it really came for us. We were kind of initially funded by my employer. We shut down a for-profit restaurant and asked ourselves what can we do in the community that would be helpful. We had been losing money in a for-profit restaurant, so we thought, why not start a not-for-profit, because we're pretty good at not making profits. So in a kind of funny kind of way, that's how it started. And then we came across this concept called food rescue. So in Indianapolis, there's an organization called Second Helpings. Food rescue organizations largely have been tied to very large cities. So I would say that we're probably one of the only organizations in a smaller city like South Bend. One of the benefits that we have is that we have a lot of food service employers in town. We have the University of Notre Dame. We have a lot of large catering. Certainly the football games bring an opportunity in the football team. But we're rescuing from perishable foods, mostly from these sources. So catering companies, schools, we'd like to get schools, especially with prepared food, to donate. Schools, any organization that has to estimate the number of people they feed, they typically overbuy and overestimate the amount of food that they make. If you can imagine being a school, you don't want to run out of food. So almost by nature, you have to overestimate that. So we'd like to get schools more involved. South Bend Schools and Marion School, which is a local private school, has donated food somewhat consistently to our program. Most of it's unprepared. So we think schools are the largest catering organization nationwide. They feed about 54 million students on a day-to-day basis. We have a sense there's a lot of food waste, especially at the prepared level. It's just convincing the community that it's safe to do this. There are federal liability laws that protect our food donors, so you won't be sued. And there's really a safe process in doing that. Second Helpings has been around for 21 years, so it's not a new concept. Instead of rescuing food from a grocery store, like Marijo talked about, we're just rescuing it from a different source, focusing on perishable items, especially proteins, because they are really expensive. So it's, and from an environmental point of view, you know, they cause the most damage. So if you're going to produce a pound of protein, try not to let it go to waste. Yeah. And that's what we help Notre Dame do in businesses across our 3 counties. We rescue straight from the farm, straight from livestock farmers and growers directly. So we get fresh vegetables right out of the garden, which are often overproduced, and something you can do and not allow it to be wasted.
I certainly know in my garden, I had so many tomatoes, I didn't know what to do with them.
You have a place to bring them now.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, Jim, there's so much to unpack in what you were just now talking about, how proteins impact the environment and how we should not let proteins, particularly proteins, go to waste because of their dramatic impact on the environment. But something that also struck me is you said that schools are our #1 caterer in the country. I've never quite heard it said like that before. I mean, that's really quite a stunning statement that schools that are supposed to be places of education, which they are also now the primary place for food. And
half of that food support, dollar-wise, comes from the federal government through the USDA. So it's part of the ag program. It's part of how we feed our hungry, especially our most vulnerable children. And so it's efficient. The schools have the food, the students are there, but because they have to overestimate the amount of food and the number of students change every day. Even the Obama era regulations of delivering more nutritious meals, which is a great thing, added to food waste at the school level. So every community serves students. And so in my mind, every community could have a Cultivate-like organization, just with school systems, universities, and caterers as their clients. So it definitely could be done safely. And in 3 years, it's added up to 1 million pounds of food for us.
So how many staff do you have? Are they
We have
volunteers?
we have 9. We regularly have anywhere from 100 to 125 volunteers on a weekly basis that help us package, essentially put our cooked food into a frozen meal container that's frozen and then distributed in a backpack program. But 3 years ago, when we approached Notre Dame, we were just a concept in my head and the head of our co-founder, who's a chef and construction worker by trade. So the most unlikely people to start a not-for-profit.
Well, it seems like it's been very successful.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that I had is the people that you serve, are they required to have benefits, or do you track them? So do they have to have SNAP benefits? And I guess maybe we should step back a little bit and tell our audience what SNAP is. Is it the same thing as food stamps, or is it a different kind of?
SNAP is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It was formerly called food stamps.
Okay.
We do not require patrons who come into food pantries to have SNAP benefits, but we encourage them to apply for SNAP benefits because, again, it's a little bit of extra money for them. Sometimes it is just a little money. Lots of work for them to apply for SNAP benefits. There's a lot of information they require, but it also helps food pantries as well. So again, if you're getting SNAP benefits, you may not need, instead of going to the food pantry once a month, you may not need to go there. You only maybe need to go there once every other month. Something that people need to understand is that someone who relies on the charitable food system to feed themselves, it's not like going to the grocery store. So you're never going to get a week's worth of groceries at a distribution. So again, it was started, food pantries, as an emergency. To help, but for so many people now, this is how they eat each week, each month.
Why is that, Marijo?
Why is that? I
Yeah.
think so many people are working now. It's hard to make ends meet on $7.25 an hour. When you have expenses, the cost of food has gone up. Food banks have tremendous buying power because we work with brokers, and the cost for us has gone skyrocketed this year. So it's, if you are in the charitable food system, I mean, it's hard. It's hard work. You wait in lines. Again, you may go to a food pantry that does not serve one fresh vegetable for you to take home and prepare. It's canned items. So it's hard for people who are struggling. It really is. And we've always served people. There's generational poverty. Grandma went to a food pantry, mom does, I do, my daughter does, that kind of thing. But we're seeing a lot of people, again, because of this pandemic, who are here for the very first time. And again, like I said earlier, so much shame coming into the pantry that first time. People, they don't make eye contact with you. They look down.
Oh, yeah, sure.
SNAP grew, I think I looked up 17% from February to May of this year. And so, right when the pandemic hit, there's an application process that takes a bit of time. So right when the pandemic hit and people were stuck in limbo, we had one of our busiest times. And now we're at that same level. So we did have a kind of a drop, which was good, but we're incrementally seeing things rise back to those early pandemic onset levels. And so there are a lot of folks, I think Marijo addressed, that just get by, where food is such a big part of their budget. So they maybe earn enough to not qualify for SNAP benefits, but certainly with food inflation, increased housing costs, increased utility costs, all those things are such a large percentage of their income that any increase is really magnified for them. And so these programs help offset those increases, but not by nearly enough. Many food pantries, like as Marijo said, once a month, twice a month. Many community members know how to navigate the system, where they visit food pantries all across the county so they can have a more consistent supply of food support.
I think the two of you, though, really hit on something here with the idea that inflation has happened with housing and food, utilities, et cetera, et cetera. But what's the one thing that everybody has to have to get those things that has not increased? And in fact,
Wages.
has less buying power, right? And that's income. You can't live a life on $7.65. I mean, I don't know that number because I believe that you can't live on that money. And that's why, you know, in the county, in the state, and the nation, we need to get to a livable wage for this reason. And people are going to continue to fall into that gap if we don't address that wage issue.
I think I shared in our pre-conversation that some of our local teachers were starting at a wage that was at poverty level. So here you have an educated professional with college debt, presumably so, starting at a poverty level wage, which is kind of a symbol of how bad it really is in the community, that our teachers who are vital are starting at a poverty wage.
Absolutely, Jim. And then I have one other comment to that. Wasn't it last week that McDonald's and Walmart, that in an article last week, that Walmart and McDonald's employees are the largest consumers of Medicaid services in the state of Indiana. So that in fact, you know, the taxpayer, that we're supplementing the Walmart and McDonald employees because they're not being paid a living wage. And it's got to be made up someplace else. Yes, these are very difficult conversations, very difficult.
I was struck when you were talking about how people really know how to navigate and going to different pantries, et cetera. It sounds like it's almost a full-time job to do that, to put food on the table. And so you're worrying about that, and then harder to even, you know, look for a job, et cetera. But where do people go to find out where the food pantries are and the hours? I mean, is there like a single location that people can find out, or they just word of mouth and they figure it out?
We have post information on our website. I know the county, St. Joe County, has a food pantry listing that they provide to people. And then there's a lot of grassroots communication. So if they know that, like, you know, you got some good eats over at this food pantry, people can go to that food pantry. Something else that people need to understand is not every food pantry is able to serve everyone. Our food pantry serves anyone in Northern Indiana. We've served people in Michigan if they came down, but some pantries only serve certain zip codes. So you have to live in that zip code, and you have to be able to provide information that you live in that zip code.
Like mail, you have to bring mail?
Yes, you need to provide information for that.
Yeah, in St. Joe County, 211 is a service that was originally United Way, that's now FSSA.
Yep.
Indiana organization. They actually collect information about the callers. So not who, but what they're calling about. And food continues to rank as one of the first four or top four items, kind of the bad top four. right? Utilities, rent assistance, and food tend to be the three highest called about items through FSSA and the 211. And so that's a great resource. I know the St. Joe County Health Department has worked with InFocus to produce a GIS map. Notre Dame, we're working on a program to help identify where the needs are and what's needed at local pantries. That's been a 6-month project. We worked with the Center for Civic Innovations to identify food needs. So for Cultivate, it's really a focus on perishable food items. I know I didn't mention this, but we're completely funded by grants and individual generosity. We don't get any financial support from state or federal. We have gotten several donations from the USDA, food donations, and then even Marijo has donated food items. So we actually trade food back and forth. Sometimes our meals, frozen meals, to help their pantry guests, and then when she has perishable items, or even connecting us to places like Darden restaurants that she can accept, and we can. So we partner in ways to help community members and to reduce food waste in our community, which I think is pretty unique to St. Joe County.
Right, and Cultivate does our food rescue in St. Joseph County because we don't have the capacity to repackage. We just don't have the capacity to do that. So that was food that we were not able to use, that we accepted, and then had to try to find ways to redistribute it. So Jim's out with his team 5-6 days a week, taking all kinds of stuff that they can make into delicious meals.
So it sounds like in St. Joe County, there's a lot of coordination. Do you think that's true across the nation? Do different food pantries and food banks collaborate that well?
I will say for the work that I do, yes. Food bankers, we're not proprietary with our information. If we have information, we will share that with one another across the country. Throughout the pandemic, I've been involved in a couple of groups where a lot of different organizations, social service, food groups, were collaborating together. I think we all believe, that everybody deserves to eat. And eat regularly, and we'll try to work together to make that happen. I sometimes like to call it co-opetition among all these different groups of people.
So I think we need to go to some questions from the audience, but we just have one last question from us, and I'd like you each to leave us with, what do you want our community to know about food insecurity?
There are in St. Joseph County, actually in northern Indiana, we've got about 92,000 people who don't regularly eat. We're in a period, this is a marathon. It's going to take a couple of years for us to get through this pandemic, and people who aren't eating enough. And we're going to continue. We're going to need your help to get these people fed. This truly is a marathon, not a sprint for us. And we are, every week I think, are we at mile 5 yet? I don't think we're there yet. I think we have a ways to go.
Jim?
Yeah, I would say for me is become aware, educate yourself, but also understand that we rely on a bunch of independent small food pantries that have no buying power, no affiliation. There's really very little structure on how we feed people at the local level. Each pantry is unique, has its own challenges, typically under-resourced in personnel, storage space, financial resources. So, I mean, it's hanging on, and it is really being stressed right now in our community. We have organizations like Marijo, who is a large pantry in our community, the largest in our community, and serves as that food warehouse. But there's no real organized effort to get food to the local level where it's really needed. And there are a lot of individual efforts that are being done by really people that are putting a lot of hours towards it. But there's just got to be a more efficient way to feed people throughout our area. And that's what we're trying to do, I think, with cooperation from folks like Marijo and the university to figure out a better way to do this.
Yeah, and that could serve as a model for other communities also in the future.
That's what we hope.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to take a few questions from our audience. And so we have this question from Genevieve from South Bend. And she asks, what policy level changes need to be made in order to support food security efforts on the local level? And is there a policy issue that is particularly of interest to you right now? So both of you maybe could chime in.
Go ahead, Marijo.
I'm going to say, unfortunately, hunger often gets tied into other bills that are out there. And just trying to ensure that we have the resources available to do the work that we do. SNAP is one of those. Again, there's so many bills out there right now for people who are in need. And again, I think we need to look at what is that living wage, whatever that is for people, and how we can get people, not to rely on food pantries and other feeding organizations to feed them each and every week.
Right.
Yeah, we would really like, and I mentioned this earlier, public school policy education around being able to donate food to organizations like ours, especially prepared food. We had a video a couple of years ago go viral because of partnership with Elkhart Community Schools, and that we were rescuing already prepared food and delivering them back in frozen meals to their own students. And we think that's a pretty powerful concept, but there's a lot of bureaucracy around working with schools on getting food donations, especially already prepared, because the word waste and taxpayer doesn't go hand in hand. They don't like to hear waste, but it's not waste until we throw it away. And we have a sense that schools across the country throw quite a bit of food away. And if there were organizations like ours, if we can do it in South Bend, which is the 305th largest city in the country, right? You can do it in a lot of different places. So, and it really can add up to a lot of pounds and a lot of people getting fed. And we're doing for less than $2 a meal. So we can be very cost effective in doing it as well. And I don't believe, I'm not a super proud person, but I don't believe you can get a meal like ours for less than $2 anywhere. So it's a pretty good value at the same time.
It seems like we need to bring the governor up here.
Yeah, I think
really to come and have this conversation with the two of you and to tour your facilities, and also to see the lines at the food pantry and talk to a few folks about what's happening, and also these ideas that you're having about policy changes so that we can reduce those long lines and reduce the need to rely on food rescue and pantries.
Yeah, so I think we have 5 minutes left, and I'm going to take one more question. I'm going to kind of combine a couple of questions. And so this question is, I am curious I always feel good when I go to my pantry and find food items that my children can donate at their food drives at school. Is this the best way to support hunger in our community? And then the other question was posted by Marie Donahue, asking, how can we be most helpful to your work? So.
Yeah, so I know for the food bank, because I do this on occasion with various food drives, I love how I feel when I put a bag of food in a collection barrel, and I feel so good about myself. But honestly, if you're going to make a food donation to a food bank or a food pantry, first I would ask what they want. And not just go through your pantry and say like, oh, we're not going to ever eat this, so I'm going to donate that. And we accept everything. The food bank, for every $1 that is donated to the food bank, we can purchase up a little over 5 pounds of food, which is the equivalent of up to 4 meals for someone in need. So we can really stretch $1, and those dollars really, every dollar can make that difference. But again, you know, I get that there's a lot of satisfaction of taking and physically buying that food and giving that, but call a pantry or call a food bank and say like, what are your most needed items? Because we are trying to promote good health. So if you're gonna donate canned items, go for low sugar, low sodium. You know, think of protein or items that, you know, again, people can make more than one meal out of something, those kinds of items.
That's good advice.
I would add too, especially with children, I think one of the coolest things, and Marijo, you can probably attest to this, is bring your family in to volunteer. Because if you feel good about putting the canned box items into the box that's there, to volunteer, to expose your children, to educate them about the needs in the community. I think that's one of the cool, I do a lot of neat things at Cultivate. Still, one of the things I enjoy the most is to lead a volunteer group, especially a volunteer group with families and extended families, because it is social time. You can have a conversation. I always say it's not like Habitat for Humanity where you have to have high level of skills and it's really super hard work. And certainly that's a worthy organization, but it can be a small church group. It could be a social service organization. It could be family time. So it is really fun experience to come in and volunteer. And we both rely on volunteers quite a bit for our models to work. So it's convenient, easy, schedulable, and we make it as safe as we possibly can with small groups and facilities that are literally cleaned all the time.
Yeah. And what I always say about volunteering too is you're helping an organization, but honestly, when I volunteer, I feel really good about myself doing that I've really done something to help someone.
All right, we only have a couple minutes left, and there was a comment from Marie that says, thanks so much for your amazing work, Marijo and Jim, and to Marianne and Heidi for bringing them to us. So my sentiments, thank you so much for your help. And we have our quick lightning round.
Let's just do a couple, right?
Yep.
So that we asked some fun questions just to get to know you guys a little bit better. So I'll go first. Marijo, what is your superpower?
Okay, well, as someone who has never seen a superhero movie, I was like, oh my God. I'm going to say this year it's been tenacity is my superpower.
Jim, how about you?
Yeah, for me with Cultivate, it's really seeing things that aren't there, which is so atypical for an accountant, but opportunities just from working in manufacturing and having an accounting background to see opportunities to put in structure and processes and people to make a difference in the community and for the environment. So never knew I had that until I started this organization, actually.
Okay, the next question, Jim, what was the last show you binged and loved?
Oh my gosh, this is gonna date me. So Karate Kid has come out with a new series on Netflix. And for the life of me, because I'm on the moment here, I can't think of the name of it. But that's we binged that all in 1 weekend, 2 seasons. So my wife and I.
Marijo?
Okay, I'm embarrassed. I could lie and tell you something good. It's called 90 Day Fiance. I'm embarrassed, but it's mindless and I enjoyed it.
That's right. An escape, right? Marijo, what is your most treasured possession?
I have half of a wooden nickel that my grandfather gave me. I can't find, and it's very old because I'm very old, and I can't find the other half, but I just love it reminds me of him.
Yeah. Jim?
Yeah, so for me, it's twofold, just faith and family. Those
Oh.
are my treasured possessions. So
Okay, so last one, Jim, what are you deeply grateful for right now?
It's weird because I know Marijo and I, we spent a lot of time doing this, but and it's a lot of hard work, especially in a time like this. But the opportunity to serve in a time like this it's just something I never saw myself doing, being a for-profit accountant with that kind of background. So my mom's a servant at heart. I'm a servant at heart. And so when we get that opportunity in a time like this, it's really tiring and fulfilling at the same time.
Marijo?
I'm very humbled to do this work at this time, and the health of my family and my staff, because we got to keep doing this work that we're doing.
Well, thank you both so much. I think the information was fabulous and very informative for the community. And so to the audience, please take this information and pass it on and share it with your friends and family. And remember to leave us comments or any rumors that you want us to address by emailing us at consider@nd.edu. And we hope you turn in next week. We'll be discussing the day in the life of a health officer in the time of a pandemic. Dr. Bob Einters, the health officer of St. Joseph County Health Department, will be joining us. So consider this, the more you know, the more good you can do.
So be informed and act on accurate information.
And share reliable information with others.
And then until next week, be kind and give grace to each other. Thanks, you guys. This was
Thank you.
awesome. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.